Welcome to day 21 of our video advent calendar, and I have my final few ornaments in my book ready to open today. We're going to get to see what Lucy's been up to, and today we're going to talk traditions and the origins of the traditions, because there's so many Christmas traditions and things that we do that I often wonder, where did that come from? So we're going to do a bit of a did you know on Christmas traditions today, and see whether you know where some of those traditions that we have that we almost take for granted actually came from. So we'll get to that in just a moment, but let's open my book first to see what ornament I have today. Oh, I've got another one of my really pretty wooden ornaments. These are really some of my favorite, and we actually again picked this up only last year. This is a New Brunswick ornament that we added to our collection, and I really love this one. It's got the contrast of the darker wood and the lighter wood, and it's got the snowflake on it, so that's going to look beautiful on my tree. So I'm going to go and add that to my tree right now, and let's go and see what Lucy's been up to. So today, Lucy found a whole new use for my mask and built herself a hammock complete with reading lights. We have so many traditions at Christmas, and to be honest with you, if you're anything like me, you kind of take them for granted, and it isn't until you stop and think about where the tradition originated that it kind of gets you thinking. And so I thought today we'd do a little bit of a did you know about some of my favorite and probably the most popular Christmas traditions. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Christmas tree. And do you ever wonder why we have a Christmas tree in our front room and where that came from? Well, it's really interesting to find that the evergreen Christmas tree actually originates back to the Germans, the German Lutherans, right back in the 16th century. And they would bring evergreen trees into their houses because evergreens were a sign of long life, because they would last all the way through the winter season. But it really didn't become popular until Queen Victoria and Prince Albert published a picture in 1846 of their family around a decorated Christmas tree. And then that's when it became really popular in England, and then it kind of spread throughout the world. But what's interesting is way back in the early 1900s, having a Christmas tree with lights on, so having an electrically lit Christmas tree, was a huge status symbol. And Christmas lights were expensive, and in fact they used to rent them rather than sell them because they cost so much. So what about Boxing Day? Do you know why we call it Boxing Day? Obviously it's the day after Christmas, but the first ever time it was recorded was back in 1833. And there are several different stories as to how Boxing Day originated, but the one I've always heard is that back in the day after Christmas was the day that the servants had a day off. And it was the day where their employer would give them a box as a gift. And in that box there would usually be some different food and different items that they would have as their Christmas gift. And so it became known as Boxing Day because the servants were being given a box from their employer, and so they would have a day off, and then they would take their box and go and see their family and give their gift in the same way. And that's how it became known as Boxing Day. Now the next tradition is one that I'm very familiar with coming from England, but it's not as popular here in Canada or in North America, and that's the Christmas cracker. And you've probably seen them. They have the little snapper inside, and they were invented back in the 1840s by a gentleman named Tom Smith, and he was inspired by the candy wrappers that he'd seen on a trip to France, or the bonbon wrappers, and he came back to England and he created the cracker, and inside he put some candy and he made it look a little bit like a bonbon candy wrapper. And at first they were not very popular, but then he decided to add in the snap, so he called them bangs of expectation. And he brought out these crackers. When you pulled them, they made this bang from the snapper, And gradually the popularity grew and they started creating themed crackers, and now in England particularly, and you can find them here in Canada too, you can get crackers from every type and all sorts of, very traditionally you get a joke inside and you get a little hat and you get a little toy or a little gift, but pretty much these days you can find a cracker with pretty much anything inside. And our final tradition is the mince pie. Now, mince pies are something that you can't have Christmas without in my world. Coming from England, they're a kind of a staple, and they're not quite so popular here in Canada, but originally they were a meat pie. They were a small meat pie, and over the years that has changed, and they're now made of dried fruit and a spice mix. And they're sweet, and you have them either with custard, or my favorite is I have them with ice cream. But back in the Georgian days, they were very much seen as a status symbol. And when you would go to different Christmas parties, people like to show off at those parties and have their mince pies made in all different shapes, so stars and moon shapes, and it kind of was very much a status symbol that said, if you could afford a pastry chef that could make these beautiful pies, then you were doing very well. And so over the years, it has become much more popular and much more common, and pretty much everyone now has mince pies, but back in those days, they were seen very much as a sign of your wealth. So enjoy the rest of your day today, and I will see you tomorrow on day 22 of our video advent calendar.